afraid.
Afraid of fortune?
Not that, sir. I'm afraid of deceit. I hear too often how you noble men treat us country maidens when your promises win us.
Slanderous ravings of the envious low-born. A man of birth has an honesty native to his blood. Be not afraid, my dearest. Submit to fortune. We'll be married today.
Sir.
Sir, no longer. Soon in the book of heaven, your name and my name will always be together. Lady Selina, here with our hands entwining, let our design agree. Lingering here serves no one. Why not walk on with me?
My heart is more than willing. I tremble to depart, yet fear you may deceive me. Should I obey my heart? Should I obey my heart?
Come to your noble lovers,
whom Mazetto suffered.
Peasant you'll be no longer.
Greatly I would that I were stronger, that I were stronger, that I were stronger.
Dearest, gently, here with our hands entwining,
I fear you may deceive me.
why not walk on with me?
I tremble to depart.
Let our designs agree.
Should I obey my heart?
Come to your noble
Must Lord
lovers,
Mazetto
peasant
suffer?
will be
Dearly, I
longer.
hope I can be stronger. I can be stronger. I can be stronger.
My love, be mine.
I will.
Together let us purely indulge a whim we surely are faultless to fulfill. For noble man and peasant, while doing what is pleasant, cannot do doing ill. Be mine.
My love, be true.
I will. We'll go without delay, and cheerfully at play, love innocently still.
Bravo. That's it for today. Next week we're doing Goethe Dämmerung.